Lori doesn't know that already. Right.
Good morning. My name is Lori Douglas and my sleep. Here we go. All right. It's my pleasure to serve you this morning as the worship associate and the president of the Board of Trustees for this service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Charlotte County. This service is being broadcast live and recorded on YouTube. We are a progressive and inclusive spiritual community, welcoming fellow seekers regardless of age, ability, economic status, or education, regardless of skin color or national origin or language of origin, regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. All are welcome here. Please silence your phones and I'll remind you to turn them back at the end of the service. We got a couple of items here, housekeeping stuff. Since we're still coping with the COVID ID things, please, while in the building, please wear your mask. Practice social distancing. Chairs are arranged, obviously, with the push pins. Ideally, not to sit on the push pins or lean on the push pins. We have eliminated the women's and the men's bathroom designations. This means, for if you haven't been here for a little bit here, that means there's 2 bathrooms and 1 person or 1 family at a time. We've got these very cool little vacant and occupied sliders outside the hallway that you can know that somebody's in there, and hopefully they didn't forget to change it back when they came out. Let's see here. And we are a small crowd, so I'm not going to worry about big long lines by the bathroom. Yeah. All right. We're entering the building through the back, and when we exit, we're going out the door here, which is a little different too, but that'll work. All about social distancing. Now, the hardest thing for me, at least, is please do not sing. We can hum quietly in our masks. We can move around and make movements and stuff, but singing is not a good thing in COVID. I'd like to express gratitude today for Jackie M., who has been our connections coordinator, and this is her last week with us, being that we've gone to reopening. So she will be off and running with her yoga practice. Next, thanks to by and Tom in the back there for being our tech wizards, and to our greeters for the day, earmarked by the, well, they're not down anymore. And Linda and Gudrun and Sharon. Where are you? Sharon's way in the back. Yeah, that's right. Sharon is training to be a tech person. Yay. Okay. And If you're new here and you hadn't had the opportunity yet to fill out a card, please stand with us. Stand up if you're comfortable, or raise your hand so we can see you and introduce you. Aha, welcome. Andrea, raise your hand again so we can wave. Yay. Yeah, and anybody else? Andrea for the first time. Okay, thank you.
Lori, is Terry in there?
No. If this is a meaningful experience for you at this service, we hope to see you again. And if you'd like to find out more about us, have a chat with Lynn here, who's our interim membership coordinator. Our speakers this morning are from our very own fellowship. During our times of challenge to rights on so many fronts, Joseph Fenty and Lynn Ritchie will be here, staying with our theme of the month, Enter, Rejoice, and Return, as we once again return to our focus on justice with their presentation of women's suffrage in a little bit, a model for social justice. Now we move to our chalice lighting. Is Bobby here? Or Bobby just left? Okay. All right, Peggy Dawn, would you be willing to come up and do the chalice lighting? Thank you. There's a weird new thing here.
A new skill.
A new skill. It's a push forward, push back.
Oh, I know how to do that.
Oh, you do? I didn't know. Last time I needed lessons.
Well, I think I know. No, I can't do that.
Okay. Here. It's weird. Just pull back with one hand and then push down.
Oh, I was doing the opposite.
Okay. There you go. Thank you. We got a high-tech chalice lighter now. Yay! Thank you, Peggy Dawn. We light this chalice today in honor of the Unitarian Universalist first principle, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We recognize that these are not just words to be spoken. Instead, they call us out of our comfort into an even deepening, ever deepening commitment. A commitment we make to the rights of all those whose inherent worth and dignity are denied, diminished, or destroyed by systems of oppression. And they call us into the practice of looking into our own hearts with courage and honesty. Please join me in the recitation of our affirmation. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our aspiration, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth and love, and to love, help one another. Yes. Okay, our opening words today are from Monica Jacobson Tennyson, an ordained minister in 2018, who's currently serving in the state of Washington as a hospice chaplain. What is it that calls you here? That calls you onward, that calls you inward, that leads you homeward? What is it that gives you power? The power to make that change, to ask that question, to take that journey. What is it that says you have done well, that asks you to learn more, that brings you to stillness, that holds you up in hard times? It is relationship. The beating heart of our faith. It begins when we share this hour, our truths, this air, our hearts. Come, let us worship together. Our music today is Lift Every Voice and Sing. Please rise in body or spirit for our first song and hum quietly. Or if you like, use movement to express the wonderful energy of this hymn. And if you don't, you can sit there quietly too. And Corey will get our music going, and we can lift every hum. Completing this reading, we will maintain a period of silence followed by Spirit of Life hymn. Mary Jane is recuperating well from her back surgery this week, and she'll be back this following week and be working half days. Calls are welcome. Visits are welcome. Helen S. also had surgery this last week and is home now, and she welcomes visits when she's ready. So call ahead. Lori, her daughter, staying with her, and she's doing well too. Yay. Okay, we now acknowledge unspoken joys and sorrows that we carry here into our collective energy. We'll take a moment of silence, and I'll ring the bowl when we are completed. It is now my pleasure to introduce our very own Joseph and Lynn to share their presentation on women's suffrage, a model of social justice.
Good morning. So this is not a typical place for me to be, behind the pulpit, but several years ago, actually maybe 10 years ago, when I still lived in Massachusetts, my adopted home of Worcester was the home to Lucy Stone, who was a suffragist. And there were many women that I was in fellowship with that were part of the what became the National Women's History Project. And so they, 2 years ago, in 2019, I came across this wonderful slide presentation that depicted the struggle of these women. And I noticed at once that it's really a model for many of the social justice activities that take place. There's, persistence, there were hunger strikes, there were so many, and it's sort of blurring out, but we'll review all that when we see the video presentation. So a couple of years ago, Joseph and I began to do this, and we were hoping to really sort of get good at it and take it out to community organizations and really celebrate the work that these women had done. So here we are today presenting it to you, trying to create a sermon about it, because of course, social justice is at the heart of Unitarian Universalism. It's replicated so many of our principles. So August 2020 was to have been a grand centennial celebration. It was the passage of the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote. But 2020 proved to be a very different and difficult year than anyone could have imagined. Our nation coped, and still is, with the uncertainties and losses provided by a worldwide pandemic. We suffered extreme political divisiveness, and we witnessed a summer filled with Black Lives Matter protests in response to the brutal treatment of Black people by police. Celebrations were difficult to muster in 2020. Perhaps we're a year late for a grand centennial, but today we can at least share the story of a movement, a social justice movement, a movement that would establish a right that had been denied to half of the population. Women's suffrage and the story of how women won the right to vote is an illuminating history lesson. It's the story of a movement that spanned 50 years, involved multiple generations, some women whose their daughters and granddaughters also participated in the same struggle. These women organized, they strategized, they employed creativity, they endured injustices and physical suffering. How they persisted time and again, non-violently, in their effort to effect change is a model for social justice activism. The pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice are values not only enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and Constitution, they are values shared by Unitarian Universalists and expressed in 4 of our 7 principles. So today, will you join me? We've got Corey tune up our video presentation as we celebrate the American women's suffrage movement, how women won the vote.
Mic check. Mic check.
Yeah, there we go. In the interim, I want to thank Jackie for her your enthusiastic miming the hymn.
Thank you.
It's powerful. I mean, I chose it particularly for the words, which of course we couldn't speak. So, but thank you, the enthusiasm. It was an anthem. It was a march. You could hear the desperation and then the triumph of the celebration of success. I don't have it.
Okay. Every year, we celebrate the anniversary of women winning the right to vote, which became official on August 26, 1920. This great crusade, led by American suffragists, empowered women in all walks of life and franchised half the country. It was the first great civil rights movement of the 20th century.
Suffragists literally wrote women into history, as this wonderful illustration from 1915 suggests. Many people find it amazing that women weren't always considered equal citizens, but it's true. For years, only men voted on the issues and candidates of the day. In 1920, according to some historians, Congress gave women the vote by passing the 19th Amendment, guaranteeing women's suffrage, but they won it.
But women weren't really given the vote by men. Women won the vote by persuading voters and by winning elections. For over 5 decades, suffragists campaigned to put the question of women voting on the ballot, and then to convince enough men to vote to enfranchise women. That was no easy task, and it demanded a degree of boldness and daring that we celebrate today.
One of the movement's early leaders, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, pictured here on the right with Susan B. Anthony, remembered that night after night by an old-fashioned fireplace, we plotted and planned the coming agitation.
Stanton and Anthony were remarkable American leaders who devoted their lives and talents to women's equality. Their goal was a new constitutional amendment that enfranchised women, and they regularly testified for it before congressional committees. However, as they found out, women didn't have any political power and were unable to change the law of the land.
Susan B. Anthony showed exceptional courage and a passionate love of democracy when she actually went to the polls and voted in 1872 as a test case. Anthony was not only lampooned here as the woman who dared, but she was also arrested, tried, and convicted of voting, which was a crime only because she was a woman.
When the judge imposed a fine of $100, Susan B. Anthony boldly refused to pay it and told him that instead she would continue to, quote, educate all women to do precisely as I have done, rebel against your man-made, unjust, unconstitutional forms of law that tax, fine, imprison, and hang women while they deny them the right to representation in the government. Close quote.
Slide. Next slide. Thank you. Lucretia Mott and Lucy Stone were two of Susan B. Anthony's mentors who opposed slavery and supported women's rights. Lucretia Mott declared, "What does woman want? She wants to be acknowledged, a moral, responsible being. She's seeking not to be governed by laws in the making of which she has no voice." Lucy Stone, Abby and Julia Smith, and several other suffragists chose the nation's centennial in 1876 to publicly refuse to pay their taxes to protest the fact that women have no political representation. As a result, some of their possessions, including furniture, livestock, and even a farm, were seized and sold by the government.
Black women also showed courage in the face of injustice both before and after the Civil War. There were several early Black suffragists who spoke out for racial and sexual equality. Frances E.W. Harper was a successful poet and lecturer who used her earnings to aid fugitive slaves. Sojourner Truth, a former slave, spoke out for equality and preached extensively throughout the southern states.
Women in Black communities worked for decades, largely separate from white suffragists, but keeping their eyes on the same prize. Over time, Black women's clubs and the Baptist Church became major centers of suffrage activity throughout the country.
Suffragettes were discouraged when they found little support in Congress for a woman's suffrage amendment to the Constitution. So they began a series of difficult but exciting electoral campaigns to win the vote in individual states. These drives needed to win the support of male voters, but the first years were discouraging.
Suffragists waged 14 state campaigns between 1867 and 1900, but they won only two, Colorado and Idaho. The two Western territories that had already approved women's suffrage, Wyoming and Utah, became equal suffrage states in 1890s. These four states, symbolized by four stars, were the only places women could vote equally with men until 1910.
State electoral campaigns were not for the faint-hearted. They were arduous and all-consuming adventures that demanded months of travel and a wide array of skills, including the power of persuasion and an unusual degree of self-sufficiency. Suffrage organizers and field workers like Boston's Margaret Foley here were exceptional women who were able to meet the many challenges.
Carrie Chapman Catt, a young school teacher from Iowa who rose to national prominence, once summarized her own experience. I have given my life to the suffrage work. I have opened the doors of churches and halls and lighted the kerosene lamps, attended to the babies while the meeting was in progress, made the speech, taken the collection, pronounced the benediction, organized the club or committee, and have held all the offices imaginable from club president up and down and sidewise. Suffragists did it all out of necessity. Nearly all their work was voluntary and unpaid.
These organizers traveled throughout rural and undeveloped areas, often found that just getting from one place to another was an ordeal. Once, when a wreck blocked the train she was on, Carrie Chapman Catt commandeered a flat railroad cart to take her back to the station. Finding a willing brakeman nearby, she took off, clinging to the small cart as it set off downhill.
The cart quickly gained speed and her first lunch bag, and then her hat flew off. She held on for dear life as the cart swerved violently back and forth around the sweep curves and for miles and miles. It turned out the brake consisted of a piece of wood that the brakeman shoved against the wheels. When the cart finally coasted into the station, the shaken organizer climbed unsteadily off and immediately made new plans. Like most suffragists, she was determined to appear where she was expected and was resourceful enough to make it happen.
Anna Howard Shaw was a beloved national leader who was also a minister, a doctor, and acclaimed orator. She spoke for equal rights in every state and remembered being thrown to the floor of her train once when it hit a wagon full of gunpowder and dynamite. Fortunately, the dynamite was frozen, so only the gunpowder exploded. Otherwise, she would have been killed.
When Anna Howard Shaw and Susan B. Anthony were delayed by another train wreck, Shaw once famously crossed the tracks and boarded a train going in the opposite direction. At least it's going somewhere, she called back to her astonished friend. Shaw's belief was that if one intends to get someone somewhere, it is better to start even in the wrong direction than to stand still.
Suffragists crisscrossed the country for decades, despite the difficulties and personal dangers, to put their cause directly to the people. And that unwavering faith in democracy is part of what we remember and celebrate today. These brave and hardworking women were committed, they were courageous, and they triumphed despite all odds.
One of the suffragists' greatest challenges was to win the powerful and diverse state of New York. Without it, a new constitutional amendment was impossible. In 1910, New York suffragists launched a series of vibrant, colorful parades that dramatically showed politician women's growing demand for the vote.
These festive demonstrations, complete with floats and marching bands, drew tens of thousands of marchers and hundreds of thousands of spectators. They were spectacular political events that also became major cultural and social affairs.
State leader Gertrude Brown recalled that there was something in the atmosphere on parade day. We women who marched in a suffrage parade will never forget the thrill of hearing her own band strike up, the command of her leader, of swinging out into the avenue in step with the music, passing the multitudes of spectators, head up, eyes straight ahead in perfect formation, with the conviction that we were marching for a great cause.
Another New York leader, Harriet Stanton Blanche, who was Elizabeth Cady Stanton's daughter, realized that sermons and logic never convince, that human beings move because they feel, not because they think. For that reason, they began to dance about their cause at great balls, instead of sitting in corners and arguing. Her 1913 vote for Women Ball attracted over 8,000 people.
Suffragists thought creatively. From the 1915 New York campaign, they carved an actual torch of freedom out of wood and painted it gold to symbolize their democratic crusade. It drew almost reverent attention wherever it was displayed. In Pennsylvania, women recast the Liberty Bell and toured the state with it, saying it would ring only when women were able to vote.
Patriotic references and imagery like this Minute Woman from 1915 reinforced their case. One state suffrage leader, Vera Whitehouse, reasoned to a reporter that if women really belonged in the home, as opponents claim, then maybe all women should just stay home one day. Her whimsical idea of a one-day strike sent shockwaves through New York and led to long, hysterical articles on the damage such an act would do to businesses, schools, hospitals, and so on. Without lifting a finger, only voicing an idea, Whitehouse made an undeniable point. Modern society depended on women's work, and women in the workforce needed and deserved the right to vote.
Being bold and innovative was a good part of why suffragists were successful winning more states. Even though they couldn't vote, these women mounted effective campaigns that helped defeat powerful opponents in the Massachusetts and New York legislatures. They also organized boycotts to pressure the major political parties and even founded their own political bodies, including the Women's Suffrage Party and the National Women's Party.
Between 1900 and 1920, suffragists waged another 40 state campaigns. Remarkably, they won 11 of them, nearly all in the West. By 1919, women could vote equally with men in 15 states, and they could vote in the primaries or for presidential electors in another 15 states.
The steady, deliberate buildup of strength in so many states finally forced politicians in Washington, D.C. to recognize women's right to vote nationally. But opponents delayed action for as long as they could.
The final battle in Washington, D.C. included some intense lobbying drive that grew to involve hundreds of women from throughout the nation. Suffragists testified before congressional committees, organized local pressure to sway timid politicians, and overcame every obstacle to steer their controversial bill through Congress.
At the time, suffragists led by Alice Paul also began picketing Woodrow Wilson's White House with banners asking, "Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage?" This was the first time the White House had been picketed, and it drew national attention.
The silent picketers were part of an unprecedented direct action campaign that held Wilson as president and the head of the ruling Democratic Party responsible for passage of the 19th Amendment. Alice Paul and other suffrage leaders pointed out the bitter irony of the nation fighting a war to defend democracy abroad while denying women democracy at home.
When the Wilson administration ordered Capitol Police to begin arresting the picketing suffragists in the spring, more women arrived to take their places. Hundreds of suffragists were arrested throughout 1917, and when they refused to pay their fines for obstructing traffic, they were sent to jail.
In prison, some claimed status as political prisoners, jailed for their belief rather than any crime, and began hunger strikes in protest. Alice Paul and several other women were brutally force-fed by prison guards for weeks. Their extreme treatment drew national outrage and put additional pressure on politicians to act.
Suffragists struggled desperately to keep their cause alive during the war. Finally, the strength of their demand and the force of their pressure won out. In response to the picketing and hunger strikes, the intense lobbying, and particularly the real political gains in so many states, both houses of Congress passed the 19th Amendment in 1919.
The 36th state, Tennessee, ratified it in August 1920. And after 72 years of effort, over 20 million women were enfranchised. This was the single largest extension of suffrage without a revolution, and it was accomplished solely through disciplined, nonviolent action.
Looking back over 35 years of work, Carrie Chapman Catt was ecstatic. She declared, "I have lived to realize the great dream of my life, the enfranchisement of women. We are no longer petitioners. We are not wards of the nation, but free and equal citizens. Let us practice the dignity of a sovereign people."
Alice Paul emphasized that freedom has come not as a gift, but as a triumph, and it is therefore a spiritual as well as a political freedom which women received.
The anniversary of the 19th Amendment is ultimately a celebration of suffragist success. Their great movement won political liberty for women throughout the country and remade America into a more complete democracy. Winning the support of so many American men ensured that it was truly a mutual and lasting victory.
There was still more to be done, and it would be years before laws mandated equal pay for equal work and equality in education were put into place to protect women against sex discrimination on the job and in school. In many Southern states, Black Americans remained disenfranchised until the Voting Rights Act of 1963.
But the achievement of American suffragists and the impact of the 19th Amendment are undeniable. Women play a central role in our government today, and women's votes help determine our future.
Suffragists left us a noble and inspiring heritage. Their great crusade embodied the core values we share as Americans, the desire for freedom, justice, and equality, and what suffrage and American men were able to accomplish together reminds us of our ability as a democratic country to constantly change and to grow.
It's fitting that every year we celebrate the fact that suffragists brought women, half the nation, into equal citizenship. And we remember and honor their achievement. We reaffirm their dreams, the values, and qualities to help us define us as Americans. In the cause of justice, as Susan B. Anthony always maintains, failure is impossible.
Suffragists left us a noble and inspiring heritage. The Great Crusade embodied the core values we share as Americans. We have learned, what have we learned and what do we feel when we examine the women's suffrage movement? I learned that women and their male allies can transform politics and culture in the United States to expand freedom, independence, and self-determination. I learned that these rights must be fought for because the people with the power will not give it away without a struggle. As I look at the women who fought for suffrage, I feel great admiration, pride, and appreciation for the sacrifices made on behalf of all women. My daughter, Hannah, is a direct beneficiary of these struggles. She lives in a world where her vote will count. Perhaps you can take these stories and share them with the women in your family and sustain the legacy of social justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph and Lynn, for bringing us that great piece of history and such role models. Oh my goodness. When I look at the amount of time that they worked on this and didn't give up, oh my gosh, incredible. And I think about and that we have to still, many people still have to deal with these things today. It's appalling, but we really got a good message of continuation and strength. Thank you. All right. The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. It is supported by the generosity of all who join with us, and there are several ways you can give. You can place your offerings in the basket by the exit door. When you leave the sanctuary, mail checks to the office, use our Venmo app, and write on your check if there's something specific you want things dedicated to. Your generosity is always appreciated. If you're here for the first time, do not feel obligated to live. Your presence with us is your gift to us. we would now like to join in our heartfelt humming with our final hymn, "We Would Be One." This is by the Uufcc choir again, or quarantine choir as they call it, quarantine. I think we should have worn hats today, you know, you get that from this picture, the stuff we saw, I really thought about that, at least we should have, it would have been good. We would be one. And the drum roll beats while our tech wizards get us in line here. The things we've learned in this pandemic are incredible. Oh my gosh. Switching back and forth and going forward and going this way and that way. Amazing. I don't know about you, but after hearing the words of the song and listening to what we've listened to, I'm going through my head now, what is the next move that we need to focus on? What is the next justice thing? We see all the things about voting, what's going on, and I hope that we can all take these moments to get our strength together in the direction we want to go. Now it's time to highlight Uufcc special events and activities. Remember to check your weekly copy of the updates in your email. If you haven't got it, please see me and we'll make sure that you're getting that. This includes the calendar and the links to the various connectings via Zoom and the non-in-person activities and the in-person ones. It's an important means, the updates, for us to stay connected during these times, because this is a wonderful, wonderful moment when we can see each other and do this, and they're few and far between. So whatever we can get, we'll use. Yes, thank you. And Sharon, for those of you who are unaware, this is the universal signal for applause. So if you see people doing this and you're unfamiliar, that's what we're doing. So today I have the following announcements. Let's see here. We've got, if you have an interest in being a greeter, please see Lynn, again, right there. Yes, we need greeters and we do a rotation, so it's not necessarily an every Sunday thing. Now we got a really thing to mark your calendar with. August 28th, 10 a.m. is a mask painting party. We're getting ready for our Mardi Gras, our welcome back Mardi Gras in October, and we're going to do these two parties to get ready for it. You don't have to have any artistic ability. I was like, oh, I'm scratching that off of my calendar, but no, I was corrected. You don't have to have artistic ability. We're just doing this for fun and for community. We're going to be given these masks and we're going to paint them and use them as decorations for the Mardi Gras. So please join us. There's going to be one in August. You can do both for sure, and one in September. So August 28th, Saturday at 10 a.m. And you can bring food for yourself, not to pass, but to share in the excitement of eating, which we all miss dreadfully in these times, eating together. What else this week? Monday, we have our Chalice Circle with Dennis, Spanish for Beginners going on. Worship Associate meeting is on Tuesday. Wednesday, we have Immigration Justice with Betty back there. Betty, raise your hand. There we go. Yeah, these are all on Zoom. At this, oh no, Dennis is in person. The rest of them are on Zoom. Immigration Justice still on Zoom, Betty?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Happy Hour with John Lee is on Zoom. Right, John? Yes. There he is in the back too. We can actually see the people we've been in person here that we've been Zooming all week. Wow. All right. Other things. I think that's it for announcements. Unless anybody else has anything. Okay. We are now going to, if you have other announcements, you can also send us those to us by email at to the Worship Associates at bookoflife@uufcc.org. After this, for those of you watching on YouTube, we also have the coffee chat on Zoom if you're interested in doing that. And that's at our universal link, which you can find in the updates or in the calendar. What else? Okay, today we will be, after we go Now in Peace, our final hymn, we're going to be exiting through the front door. And if you want to be on the patio and visit, Bobby's done a great job cleaning it up, and we can social distance the chairs if you want to sit, unless it's too hot, and we'll deal with that.
Here if anybody wants to talk about the presentation.
Oh, good. Yeah, Joseph. Oh, good. Joseph and Lynn will be outside if anybody wants to discuss more of the presentation. And let's see what else here. Okay. Our closing words for today. Yes. Oh, yes. We'll put your phones back on. Right. Exactly. Thank you. We didn't get that far. Our closing words, as we prepare to depart, we give voice to these hopes. May we know ourselves bound in community, even while we are apart. May a passion for justice burn in our lives. May we carry the light of compassion in our hearts and in our every interaction. May we be whole in our devotion to truth and always carry the lamp of peace before us. Jackie, would you extinguish the chalice for us here, please? And while Jackie's doing this, we will, just put it right over the top. Thank you. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of hope, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of community. May those ideals shine in our lives and warm our hearts until we are together again. Go now in peace. Join us in humming our Go Now in Peace hymn. Also, if you would like to view the art on the wall after this, please stay seated till others have exited, and then we can go around the back and come around the side.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of us surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the Spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere.
Have a great one. We'll meet you outside unless you want to see the art on the wall, and then go around the back and we'll social distance our way around.